Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Big thank you to our sponsor, Celebrity Coaches, providing transportation to the biggest names in entertainment. Thanks to Celebrity, we're hitting the road to talk to the pros that make concerts and live events happen. Today, we're on the streets of Nashville, Tennessee. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please leave us a comment. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe. Today, our guest is a very accomplished drummer and musician with countless credits, and here are just a few highlights. He was inspired at a very early age by a TV commercial for the Kiss Alive 2 album, and after some years of persistence, was finally able to convince his parents to let him play the drums. Fast forward, in 1992, he graduated from the University of North Texas with a degree in music education. Not only has he made the cover of Modern Drummer magazine, but the readers have voted him Best Drum Clinician and 6 times as Best Country Drummer. Countless TV performances include Good Morning America, Dancing with the Stars, Leno, Letterman, and all the late-night Jimmys. ACMs, CMAs, and the Grammy Awards shows as well. Recording credits include Brian McKnight, Chip Eston, and numerous multi-platinum releases with Rascal Flatts. In 2007, he opened his very own Drum Dojo teaching studio in Nashville. He is the author of 2 major drum instructional books, Song Charting Made Easy and Survival Guide for the Modern Drummer. He is the drummer and musical director for superstar country act Rascal Flatts. From Massachusetts to Texas to Kansas to Nashville, Tennessee, the pride of Natick, Massachusetts, he is Jim Riley. Thanks so much, Jim. Thanks for doing this.
Well, this is a really unique experience. This is great.
Well, I'm glad. When was the last time you were on a bus?
It was in 2019.
Yeah.
Because 2020, the dates we played were fly dates. We started our dates in March, and we did 4 casino dates, and the last ones we played, flew home, and that's when stuff started hitting the fan.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that.
Well, we talked about this earlier, and I wanted to talk some more about it. So just to kind of, let's go ahead and address the pandemic situation, that sort of thing. You have, because of your passions, you have lots of streams of income in different directions, which was a very smart thing to do. I know you weren't planning for a pandemic, but this has served you well in this situation.
Well, I've always tried to make sure to keep diversified in my portfolio of work.
Yeah.
Especially, it was funny when I started, at the height of Rascal Flatts is when I started teaching a lot, and the Flatts guys would be like, why are you spending your time doing that? We're doing great. And I'm like, we are, and I love what we're doing, but I have a passion for teaching.
Yeah.
And they could pay me $1 million a year, $1 billion a year. I'd still be teaching because it's just one of my passions. And they quickly understood that it was something that I loved. And so I would go during the days and teach drum clinics, and at night I'd be playing the shows, and they were always very supportive of that. But the truth is, I've had such a long and blessed career with Rascal Flatts. At some point, I started thinking about the idea that, at some point it's going to end.
Yeah.
I don't know how,
Yeah.
I don't know why, I don't know where, I don't know when, but it will end. And so I was definitely preparing for that time, and I didn't know that it would be a pandemic. And, I don't think it's really the end of Rascal Flatts, but it's definitely, for right now, that is definitely a situation that is in limbo, and will probably remain so for a while. So that being said, I teach, I record, I write, I produce. These are all things that I've been able to do a lot of during the pandemic. And of course, one thing, just us musicians kind of talking to each other. I mean, one of the things I was very passionate about was making sure to pay my house off. And the reason, my goal was when I bought the house in like 2008. I said, I want to pay the house off before Rascal Flatts ends. I didn't know when that was, so I just tried to pay it off as fast as I could.
That's awesome.
And that has just made things a little bit easier.
Sure.
Because, of course, my teaching and recording space, all of that stuff is wrapped up, with my home. So to have a place to operate out of is really, I feel really fortunate.
Well, it served you well. And speaking of the end of Rascal Flatts, so 2020 was supposed to be the farewell tour, for whatever that's worth. And so that would have been probably a good 100 dates on the road.
Well, it was fantastic. The Flats always took fantastic care of me. I mean, I was myself and all of the employees were salaried employees. We had a 401k retirement plan.
Wow. That's rare.
Yeah, they're really, really great. And 2020, yes, was to be the farewell tour. The guys collectively had decided that they wanted to, at least for the time, part ways and do some other things with their life and with their careers. And so, yeah, we had a big tour planned. I was already designing my kit. We were already talking about the tour, and then we went out and played those casino dates, and then it started looking funky, and then we're like, maybe we ought to move the dates in June. And so we moved the dates in June. Then we were like, we're going to start in the middle of July. And then I think everybody realized it just wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And so that certainly puts the whole Rascal Flatts thing in a place where,
who knows?
It's awkward because the guys didn't really get to make peace with their fans and say goodbye. But the silver lining in all of this is that this is me speaking my own heart.
Yeah.
I hope that maybe someday that they want to come back together, and maybe we end up on a Rascal Flatts version of the Hell Freezes Over tour. Where instead of that being the end, maybe that this ended up being a new beginning. So that's my hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like the Eagles, they thought they'd never do that again.
Right.
Everybody got to go and do their thing, and then it's like, why not? So there's we've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
But getting ready to talk to you today, I learned a lot about you, and we can't cover it all in the time that I've got here. You did give us a bonus tour of the studio, which is awesome, from Dojo. But I want to talk about that. I want to go back and talk about you from the very beginning, learning and going to school and education, that sort of thing. But I feel like with all the credits and all the accolades and things like that, I feel like Country Drummer label is well deserved, but I don't think it really covers your versatility. And if you had landed in some other band of any other genre, I think you still probably would have ended up with those same sort of titles for that genre.
Yeah, for me, it's never been about, being a country drummer or being a rock drummer or being a jazz drummer. It's always been about being a working drummer. Yeah. So as a result, I've made sure in my life to be prepared for whatever kind of music that could possibly come up. And a story that I always bring up when I talk about examples of being ready for anything is I had started playing with Rascal Flatts, and I remember that they were holding auditions for Jody Messina. And Jody did something that I don't know has been done since she did it. She had a cattle call audition. If you want to come audition, come. Here's the material. We'll listen to you. There's a lot of other funny things that leads you to Joel Stevenette at the end of that story. But my part of the story is really interesting. I'd be on Broadway in Nashville, and I'd have some guys come up to me with a CD player and headphones. Listen to this. Can you play? And they'd play it for me, and it was like this samba, and then there was like some like trading and stuff, and they're going, "Can you teach me how to play that?" I'm like, "Well, I can explain it to you." And yeah, I mean, I could definitely, if you wanted to sit down, we could work on it. But Jody was very smart to put that in her audition because, listen, if you can't play that at that time, you can't play with Jody Messina.
Right.
So she had to make sure that, hey, they may be able to play all the, the real pop type stuff and the country type stuff, but if they can't play this kind of, Gloria Estefan inspired, type of
Latin
thing, that you can't do the gig. And that's a story that I bring up all the time in terms of being well prepared. And the way that you put it is the way that I've talked about it a lot. I say, hey, listen, drop me anywhere, and I'm going to try to use my skills as a musician behind the drum set and otherwise to try to make a living. And certainly, I've been dropped inside of a pandemic, and so I've tried to adapt what I'm doing. Obviously, I'm not playing any live shows, so my teaching has gone more remote. I'm doing a lot of remote teaching. I already taught 2 lessons this morning.
Oh, wow.
I have songs to record this afternoon. For me, being my own boss, I have to be very disciplined about doing something productive every day.
Right.
For me, I actually I've got to do 3 things. I've got to make sure to either do a lesson and 2 drum tracks or 2 drum tracks and a lesson. But if I do 3 things every day, for 6 days a week, then I'm good. And if I'm not doing that, then I feel like I'm not hustling enough to take care of my family.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because you definitely fall in that category of, there's a lot of these books and articles and things about the habits of the highly successful or highly productive. And so that's a good, you're setting yourself, you're setting an outline for what.
Nobody else is going to do it.
Yeah.
So no one else is, I'm waking up in the morning. I've been doing this thing, and I'm sure one of these cameras will catch it.
Sure.
But we all remember Wile E. Coyote running, and he runs off the cliff, and he keeps running. He keeps running until he looks down.
Yeah.
And then he falls, right? So I'm Wile E. I keep running, and I never look down. And as long as I don't look down, this was the cliff that was having a super awesome, comfortable job with Rascal Flatts to being completely on my own and having to, support my family 100% on the endeavors, that I do downstairs.
Right. Well, there's very little that you haven't covered. I mean, it's like you're a music entrepreneur, composing and author, and I discovered just your huge passion for education, for teaching, which is an art in itself.
Yeah, it's a whole different skill set.
Well, it's like an athlete who can't necessarily coach, and musicians can't necessarily teach. And so, and going back to you graduating from UNT with an education degree tells me that you knew early on that was something that you really wanted to have your feet in, teaching.
Yeah, I showed up at North Texas in 1987. And I really thought, I was first chair all-state, and, I was thinking, man, they're really kind of a little bit lucky to have me.
Yeah.
And I got there, and I just got my butt kicked and my ass handed to me so hard that it was really like one of the first reckonings of my life. And I was like, wow, okay, there's a lot of fantastically talented people here, and I've got to be a lot better if I want to. It's like, I wasn't worried about the rest of the world. I was just worried at that time about surviving at North Texas. I was thinking, if I can't make it here, how am I going to make it in the big bad world? What I didn't realize is there was such a crazy concentration of amazing, talented musicians there at that time, that it was a really great place for me. I really enjoyed being at North Texas. It was really different being a kid from Massachusetts moving to North Texas in August with no air conditioning. And of course, before I met you,
Yeah.
I met your brother.
All right. There you go. Well, that's what I was going to say earlier, because I don't remember.
I kind of thought that's what
I couldn't remember
you were
if I was talking to him yesterday. My brother Roland Muzquiz. I was talking to him yesterday, and I said, I don't know if Jim and I ever talked about our Dallas time. Well, I spent a lot of time in Dallas too, and as I looked through some of the things you did, we crossed paths way before we met in Nashville. Just gigging, just some of the artists you played with and things like that, and then Brooke Mays and
Brooke Mays music.
Tommy Knuckles.
Yeah, Tommy, which, I got to see Tommy in 2010. He wasn't doing great, but he came to my drum clinic at Lone Star Percussion. Yeah. And I saw him there, and it was great to see him. And I had seen him also in 93 or so. No, it was 91. I can't remember. You'd have to check the date. The infamous Larry London clinic at North Texas, when Larry London passed, Tommy was there too. He was great. And the people at Brooke Mays, that was the store that I would go to when I was in college. And that's where I got to know your brother. Yeah.
So Roland was telling me that you would come in pretty regularly. I think you were doing some Friday, Saturday gigs.
I was
bringing a snare drum almost every week. Say,
Yeah, I was playing Friday and Saturday downtown, and I would end up. I bought my first drum rack, from Roland. Yeah. I was a regular customer. Well, and I think also Roland teaches at Richardson High School, and I think when you were in UNT, maybe the drum line came and did some things for Richardson, possibly. Yeah. So he was talking about that as well. Yeah. So, but you covered at University of North Texas. You covered the gamut. You did the marching thing. You did the orchestral thing. I did. I was definitely one of those people that was really diverse in the there's our lovely city of Nashville.
Absolutely.
I was really diverse in my interests. I was playing in the drum line. I was playing in the wind ensemble. I was playing in the top percussion ensemble. I was playing in the symphony orchestra. I was playing in the chamber orchestra. I was playing in the Javanese gamelan ensemble, the African ensemble. I was doing everything that I could. I was definitely, I wouldn't say I was the best at this or I was the best at that, but I was probably easily one of the most well-rounded players at that time there, just because I was doing so much. I was like a kid in a candy store at North Texas, and there was just so many amazing things to study, and I wanted to get into all of it.
Well, going back to when you got there and realized that you were one of probably a couple hundred percussion students, that's a point that's kind of make or break. I think, a lot of big fish coming from small ponds coming there, that sort of thing.
So 100%. Yeah. And the joke that I like to tell about North Texas at that time is it was a lot like Roach Motel. It was easy to get in, very difficult to get out with a degree. Yeah. There was a couple of hundred percussion music majors there, but when I graduated, I think there was maybe 5 of us. Yeah. From my
the initial class. Yeah.
And I know all of them.
Yeah. And you, there's kind of a all-stars list from your class or around your class year from some of the players that came out of there.
Yeah. Keith Carlock and I were in the drum line together, and his practice room was 2 doors down from mine, so I had to deal with that.
Okay. Eric Johnson of Innovative Percussion.
Yeah.
And Jason Sutter.
Yep, my college roommate sophomore year.
Yeah. Somewhere in there was Rich Redwin. Was he in your class? Was he around?
Rich came in. We were there for 1 year at the same time.
I see.
And he was getting his master's when I was finishing up my bachelor's. So we were there for a year, and us knowing each other there was actually very important in some things that would end up happening later.
Well, we'll talk about that. You at University of North Texas, you studied under Ed Soph, who has since retired, correct?
He has, yeah. He retired a couple years ago, and actually the first year after he was retired, I came and did a clinic at North Texas.
Oh, nice.
And he came,
Yeah.
which was really great full circle moment, because the room that I did that clinic in, it was 30 years to the fall when I had been there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was 2017.
Wow, that wasn't too long ago.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your two books, because
I've got a third one on the way.
Okay.
But yeah, I've got 2 books that are published, and
well, but they're not just any other books now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're almost essential now. And what we were talking about in North Texas is that they're now using your book.
yeah, that was really neat. So I did that clinic there in 2017, and they had a brand new drum set professor there. I gave him a copy of my book, and at that time, they were giving him the opportunity to reorganize his curriculum, and he decided to integrate my book into the North Texas
This is the survival guide.
Survival Guide.
Yeah.
Which that book's been amazing. I mean, I frequently get tagged in posts from people in all corners of the earth playing along with the tracks from that book, and I get letters and comments from people all over the world. When I was in the deepest, darkest moments of making that book, because it was a real trial to make that book, especially the audio, which was 124 tracks. So just think about doing about 12 solo albums, all in a row.
Yeah.
That's what that was like. Because all the music that I produced for that, I had a passion for every single track that we did. So there's no throwaway in there. So it was like, my wife would look at me and she would go, "For gosh sakes, when are you going to be done with this book?" And in those moments I'd go, at some point this book is really going to make a difference in somebody's life, in someone's development as a drummer, and so that's been really gratifying.
You didn't use one set of session guys,
Right.
to play all these different genres of music.
That was very important to
Yeah.
me. I wanted to make sure, if I was going to do this undertaking of making this book, I mean, there have been other styles books. So what I had to do was I had to be realistic about what had been done and what could I do that would make a difference, that would be worth doing. Why would anyone use my book as opposed to these books that already exist? And what I realized is that if I could use jazz players for the jazz music, country players for the country music, rock players for the rock music, metal players for the metal stuff, blues players for the blues, keep it really genre authentic, I could keep the players really inspired, the drummers that are buying this and playing along with the tracks, really inspired to play this stuff and to study it further. So that was huge, and it was great to work with just an amazing amount of musicians on that project. And I'm actually right this moment in the midst of doing the tracks for my newest book.
Okay.
And I'm working with some of the same people that I worked with 5 or 6 years ago on Survival Guide. Nice.
And so that book took you, what, a couple years?
It took me almost I think it was 3 or 4 years.
And of course, you were touring, you were teaching.
As a matter of fact, there's a lot of that music, particularly in the first chapter, but it really falls all over the place, where I was using the Rascal Flatts band on the road. Like, we would have a mobile studio, and I would go to Jay DeMarcus, who's one of my bosses and a brilliant musician, and I would say, "Hey, would you play in a session for me today?" I mean, he could be just sitting on his bus, just not doing that.
Right.
He'd be like, "Yeah, sure." And so I'd call the guys together, and I had charts written, and we would play tunes in the dressing room, and some of the best tunes in the whole project were recorded by, the Rascal Flatts band in the dressing room
On the road.
on the road.
Very cool.
Which was, really super cool. And, Jay was always very generous with his time with me. And, I really appreciated that.
Very cool. I mean, the quality of that book is what has, and going through all the efforts and all the time. And
My wife asked me when I was making it, she says, this is a serious question. Are you making this book audio too good? I went, probably. But I don't care.
Yeah.
Because for me, this book, along with other things that I do, is part of my legacy. And I have one chance to do this book right, and I'm going to do it right. So that's what I decided to do.
does she understand now the success of it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we had an agreement with that book because aside from the time that it took, if I'm being honest, it took a lot of money to do what I was doing.
Absolutely.
And she's kind of looking at me like, if this doesn't work, you can't do this again. But she believed in me. She let me do what I wanted to do, and it turned around, and we were recouped in the first year, and
That's awesome.
we've made money in the book, but that was never the intention.
Yeah.
Was making money was never the intention, and that was some really good advice I was given by a professor, a guy named Steve Houghton up in Indiana. He said, "You don't write books to make money. You write books because you're compelled to get this information out. You just feel compelled to do it, and so that's why I do what I do with those, and I sometimes go over the top with the way that I do things with it, but again, I think of it as my legacy, and I'd rather do it the right way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's paid off, and it's a and like I say, the quality of it is huge. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of instructional books. We're coming down Lower Broadway right now, and we're jumping around your story, but Broadway was significant to you, and so I'd love to hear you talk about Broadway then and Broadway now.
Yeah. So a little earlier, and we may have caught a good shot of it. We got to see a silhouette of Nashville out the window.
Sure.
I remember the first time I came over the hill on 65 and saw Nashville, and I went, there it is.
Yeah.
It wasn't the first time I was there, but it was the first time when I was moving there. It felt different.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, there it is. That's the town that I'm going to try to be successful at. So when I first moved to town, one of the first things I did was I got a job at a drum shop that was up at Broadway and 8th that's no longer there. But I got a job at that shop. They actually, this is kind of crazy, but they actually also let me live there for a while. So I was living at the drum shop. So if you've ever seen the movie Sling Blade where they were locking him into the shop, that was me. And I had my dog at the time, and so we were locked in.
Yeah.
And then just like in Sling Blade, they said, well, that's not very Christian of us. We're going to give you a key. And so they eventually gave me a key. But here we are on Broadway. It's amazing.
Well,
so I started down here. I got some of my first jobs at a club that was on the corner right there. It was called the Music City Lounge, which got destroyed in the what was it, the 1998 tornado?
Tornadoes, somewhere around there, yeah.
And so that one got destroyed, but like the first gig I had there, it got canceled because some guy got shot. And so I got a call, on my beeper saying, that the gig had been canceled. But eventually I started working there, and there was a bass player at that gig that had played with early on with Tim McGraw, and then he ended up hooking me up with a little bit of road work that summer in '97. So there was a young guy named Rich McCready that was trying to make it. Mm-hmm. I played with Rich. And played with a couple other acts. I actually did July 4th down here
on the river.
On the river with a show band, and just kind of surviving, trying to make it. Then that drum shop closed down, and of course I was still living there. So at that point, I was homeless. So I was literally at that point I was living in my truck, with my dog, in the back of the truck, and I was parking at behind a club that is now where Broadway Shoes is, over by a little bit closer to Music Row over there. And eventually we circle back to someone that we were talking about earlier, which was I got a text from Rich Redmond saying, "Hey, can you watch my cat for like 2 weeks? I got to go on a West Coast run." He was playing with a girl named Amy Dowley before she'd gotten signed. They were going out and playing some dates. And I said, yeah, sure. So he gave me the key to his apartment, and I moved in. I'm like, yeah, I'm watching your cat. My dog's watching your cat. We're all watching your cat. And when he came home, I said, hey, how much is your rent here? And he told me, and I just gave him that, like half of that in cash. I said, well, I guess I'm your new roommate. So I was just living out in the living room.
Oh, nice. And he moved to town around the same time?
Almost the exact same time. That club that I was talking about that I would park behind, I can't remember what the name of that club was. 16th Avenue Cafe.
Oh, okay.
16th Avenue Cafe. He and I saw each other at 16th Avenue, and I was like, hey, what are you doing here? Hey, what are you doing here? It's been a couple of years. Yeah, I just moved here. We moved at almost the exact same time. And so, we tried to, support each other's career. And certainly after I got the gig with Mark Chestnut in '97, I was throwing everything that I could at him. We actually just talked the other day.
Tell me about getting the call to work with Mark Chestnut.
That was interesting. So another person that I spoke to on Facebook yesterday was a guy named Mike Seiler. Mike was playing 6 to 10 at Legends Corner, had a good country band, really super country. It was fun. And he called me up and he said, hey, can you play with us, Wednesday, 6 to 10? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. He says, good. He says, I got this bass player. He says, you're going to love him. A guy named Steve Ledford. And so we got there and we just connected. We just totally connected. And we knew it. It was like falling in love a little bit. We just had that connection. Yeah. We played so great together. And he knew some guys that were playing with Mark Chestnut. A couple of guys ended up getting let go. He got hired. They had a plan to hire a different drummer that had more experience than me. But that did not work out. So they went to Steve and they said, well, you're kind of the man about town on Broadway. You know all the players. He said, who would you hire? And he recommended me. So Steve called me up and he says, hey, I got a gig for you. I said, when? He says, well, it's not like that. He says, it's an artist gig. And I was like, what do I got to do? Who do I got to call? He's like, you don't have to do anything. Yeah. He says, just tell me when the next gig you're playing is that a couple of these guys can come out and hear you. So there's a club at a hotel on Trinity Lane called the Broken Spoke. Okay. I was playing there on Sundays and Mondays. So one of those nights, a couple of the guys from Mark Chestnut came in, and it was a perfect gig. The guy I was playing with was actually the first artist that got signed on Broken Bow Records. They never released him, but this guy was a great country singer. So I was playing with this killer band, great singer, and it was the perfect showcase for them to hear me. And so they basically said, you're hired, gave me a set list, gave me some tapes. I remember it was tapes. Yeah. And said, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And my first gig with them was actually a television spot on the first season of The View, with Barbara Walters and Star Jones and that whole crew. Yeah. And it was pretty interesting. So my first gig with those guys was playing on national TV on a rented kit. I remember Mark Gould, who's the longtime engineer for Brad Paisley. He was with Mark Chestnut. He put a set of E1 Sures in my ears. and first time I'd ever had in-ear monitors in, and we ended up going live, and they're going 5, 4, right? And that at that moment, and this is a true story. At that moment, I realized the only sticks I had were the sticks in my hands. I left my stick bag on the other side of the studio, so I was holding onto those sticks for dear life, going, if I drop a stick, I'm on live national TV.
And the first time you're playing with this band.
And it's the first time I'm playing with this band.
National TV.
So so I did not drop my sticks, and it worked out fine. And I played with Mark for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I ended up picking up some gigs with Hank Williams III, who had come into a club on Lower Broadway where we just were, heard me playing with a jazz band, and was like, I want you to come play with me on some dates. And he was doing kind of some rockabilly, punkabilly, metalbilly type things.
Yeah.
And I played with him, for a while, and was playing with Mark. And I ended up quitting both of those gigs to when I got the call for Rascal Flatts.
Right. And Rascal Flatts at that time was just, they had just gotten signed. They were about to sort of hit the road.
They were pretty new. So my story with Rascal Flatts is that, so Jay loves to tell this story. So I'll tell Jay's version of the story.
You remember it differently?
Crap. I remember it totally differently. So Jay's version of the story is he walked up to me at Barbara's in Printer's Alley. I had just played. He thought I was a nice player, so he wanted to meet me and say hi. And I was eating a gyro. There was a gyro stand out behind Barbara's, and I was eating this gyro, and I had long hair, and so he says he came up to me and he was like, "Hey man, I'm Jay. It's really nice to meet you, man. You sounded really great." And he said that I just kind of looked up and sneered and was like, "Yeah, man, just got the gig with Mark Chestnut. Just went back and eaten my stuff." He's like, "Well, okay, nice to meet you." He's like, "What an asshole, man." The thing I really more remember about meeting Jay was there was a band that everyone thought was going to be the band that was going to get signed and make it, called the Blue Heelers. Insanely talented group of players. Yeah. And Jay and I were on the fringe of that. And Jay would sub playing keyboards, he would sub playing bass, and we would sub playing bass. He was singing the bass player's parts, and we would sub playing keys. He would sing the keyboards player's parts.
Wow.
So it was really complicated.
Yeah.
I would sub on the drums. We started playing together a lot around them. There was a really great culture at that time of, just players with guitars on their backs, and it was just, it was like people like, it was almost like the Crossroads movie, it was like cutting heads. It was like people wanted to like really get after it. It was a super fun time to be in Nashville. And so we were around these musicians that were taking country music, and we were really improvising around it. It was really great. We all think about that time very fondly. And so Jay and I started playing together on some different gigs, calling each other for some different gigs. At that time, he started playing keyboards, and it was musical director for Shelley Wright. Shelley Wright was on tour with Mark Chestnut, so we would see each other on the weekends. Yeah. Then we would see each other at gigs during the week.
Right.
We were together more than we were apart.
Yeah.
I knew that he was working on something with his cousin Gary. And then when Joe Don moved to town, I remember very clearly, Joe Don got up with them, and they kind of all felt like something magic had happened. And so the three of them started playing together, and they were using Shelley's drummer normally, but then when they weren't using Shelley's drummer, they were using me to sub with them. So I was, there's tapes of me playing with them, summer of '99 videos, and Jay and I just musically always had. He's just that other guy that I had this amazing connection with, and our connection has, lasted, over 20 years. Everything Jay and I did was was easy. It was playing together, just really made sense for us. And so, Jay and Joe Don and Gary, we'd kind of all talked about the idea that, yeah, if they made it with Rascal Flatts, that maybe you'd like to have me play with them. And so I ended up getting a call from Jay saying, hey, I know you're playing with Mark, and I know that's a great gig, and he's a much bigger star than we are, but if you'd like to take a chance with us, we'd love to have you. And for me, at the age that I was, I had been with Mark on the backside of, in the early 90s, mid 90s, he was huge. He was playing big arena shows. He was string of #1 hits. When I got there, it was the backside of that.
Yeah.
So I was, in my heart, I was going, man, wouldn't it be really great if I could get with an act that was my contemporaries and I could watch them, and kind of go with them through this entire process.
Yeah.
Do the struggling, but then be there for the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And you dream about stuff like that, but that's the way that things ended up happening with Rascal Flatts. So we went from 2000, which was our first summer out on the road, and at that point, when I agreed to go out with them, their single hadn't even dropped.
Yeah.
Their record hadn't dropped. They were still recording the record.
It was a risk.
Yeah, it was a big risk, and a lot of people thought I was pretty dumb for doing it. To leave an artist that has, over a dozen #1 hits to go play with your buddies that just got a record deal that might get dropped by the end of the summer if their single doesn't work. But I listened to what they were doing. I believed in musically in what they were all about. I was like, this is an amazing direction. And so I bet on them, they bet on me, and it really worked. And so I was able to grow with them.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't ready for what we were doing in 2006, in 2000. But I was able to grow into that position. Yeah. And it was an amazing opportunity.
It's been an amazing ride, and there's not that many musicians that get to start from the beginning of their career like that. And also, from some of your experience on Broadway and around Nashville, a lot of those new artists get eaten up. You never hear from them again. They have a flash and they get signed and they have a big single or a potential single, and people are dumping money, a label or somebody's dumping money into them. And you think, well, this is a sure thing. But
it's crazy, man.
We can make a list of all the names that have just disappeared. So great ride.
No, I felt really fortunate, to be with these guys. I believed in what they were doing. They believed in me. When Jay hired me, he said, or he called me to hire me, and the three guys hired me. He said, we want to hire, at the time, he said, we want to hire a band that will be with us for our entire career.
Yeah.
And of course, Jimmy and Bo, which were the other two original sidemen, they were a little bit older. They were more accomplished. Jimmy had just come off of playing with Garth Brooks, so he played with Rascal Flatts for a little while, but then, he got called from Alan Jackson, and he was playing with Reba, and he was, playing back with Garth now, he had a different path. We were grateful to work with him at that time. And same with Bo Cooper, he was just looking at different things. For me, I saw what I was doing with Rascal Flatts as the prize. Yeah. Like, this is the deal. And so I was very grateful to be there and grateful to be able to grow with that gig and to be able to do all of the amazing things that we've been able to do over the years.
Yeah, and even with the success of that, just like anything else, there's highs and lows. Because I remember we were on the road in 2001. Rascal Flatts was opening for Jody Messina on the Burn Tour.
That was our first opening slot on a tour, and we were so excited.
Yeah, and talking about going from what you started as and the core band and how the production has grown and all sort of things. But I also remember Gary walking around backstage at that time, a little frustrated, couldn't get their new single played and things like that.
Oh yeah.
I just and it wasn't very long after you guys were already headlining. And then also with that, the production has grown immensely. So your responsibilities have grown. You're the musical director, the band leader, responsible for all that sort of thing. And I've gotten the opportunity to sit behind you during shows in the last few years. And it's not for the faint of heart. You're not just counting off tunes. You're like directing traffic.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. People have no idea up front. You've got, those guys are up front. Gary's up front smiling at everybody. And meanwhile, you're back there operating like a cockpit of a huge jet plane or something.
Yeah, so it started, the first year I was not musical director.
Yeah.
I wasn't band leader. I was just playing drums. And after the first year with Rascal Flatts, after 2000, so I got a call from management, and they said, we're not making any changes in the band, but the Flats would feel more comfortable if you took over the responsibilities as band leader. And I guess maybe they understood, somewhere in their heart that maybe I was going to be that one that was going to be with them, for a long time. And I credit them. I think that was a good decision, because I've been able to be kind of a steward of the band for literally 20 years to guide them through, the various incarnations of their band based on their needs at the time. And I've always been grateful to be a consistent part of that. And I think that for them, I think it's been good, because there's a certain historical perspective there where they know anything they know, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
So we can get through just about anything that we've all done together. And it's still really great to make music together.
It's very cool. Like I said, so many things to talk about and cover. I want you to talk about.
So you were gonna. So you mentioned sitting behind me and some of the So some of the things. So as musical director, that job kind of developed. At first, I was literally running an ADAT machine.
Yeah.
Which was awful because it was really slow. I remember being on the Wayne Brady show, and they went, "Please welcome my friends from Nashville," and then I was like, so now I got to stop it. Yeah. And then it was like, then it wants to and do all this stuff, and I felt like everyone in America was waiting for me for 20 seconds. I think it was 5, but then later it was hard drive machines, and then it was computers where we're running click tracks, because of course, as you know, we've got video material that's synced. We've got lighting material that's synced. We have some stage moves or pyro, and everything's synced up. And so I've got to be the one that is flying that ship, but at the same time, I've got 2 microphones next to me, one to sing with and one to speak to the entire band and crew. If, we're skipping a song, or if something has gone haywire,
if you blow a snare,
and I need to bring everybody back together, I'm like, and it's stop on 4, 3, 2, 1, bam,
well, you also had blow out a snare or a pedal or something like that, and have to let the band know you're not coming in at a certain time.
We did that happened. I literally had a bass drum pedal break on the last hit of a song, and I told my drum tech Craig, I said, I just broke my pedal, so I need my spare.
Yeah.
And the next song, there was no stopping it.
Yeah.
It went. Yeah. It started with just acoustic and keyboards, and so I told Jay, I said, Jay, I'm not going to be ready to come in, so you're going to have to lay out until I'm ready. Yeah. And so then he was changing the pedal, and then I'm like, all right, here we go. 1, 2. And then we came in, and it was like, it was nobody, literally nobody would know, but it's the kind of stuff that happens, or like we just improvise a little thing, and we start playing something, and I'm the one that can help us get stopped on a dime so that it sounds like whatever it was we did, we rehearsed.
Right. Well, that's a lot of people don't understand the complexity behind a production that size. When you have video that's synced up to the music, and there's a click that everybody has to follow, and you're running the whole thing.
The last couple of years we were running with time code.
Right.
So, the time code from my machine is literally, like actually firing the video and actually moving some of the lights. We did not have it connected to our physical. We always had somebody, like on one of our last tours, we had a lot of motion pieces on stage, and those were always controlled by hand. But all of that stuff had to be, it was an interesting choreography. You know, the production manager is in charge of that stuff every moment of the day until the show.
Yeah.
And then the show is really when I take over.
Puts it in
And then
your
the
hands.
production manager
Yeah.
takes over after that.
Yeah.
So, but during that 90 minutes or 2 hours, I've got to be the quarterback.
Yeah. Well, you can't show up not alert. Is it just a soda, or is it Mountain Dew, or is it
You know,
coffee?
I really feel like the thing that has kept me employed, thankfully, is I have a very clear passion for the music. I think when I work for somebody, you know, particularly with Rascal Flatts for the last 20 years, I think that my passion for their music and for their show to be great was evident and measurable. And they always knew that if, let's just say, their batteries were running at 80% because they've been giving interviews all morning, and they had to, you know, go out and do this other meet and greet at this mall, or they had to, you know, do something for the label, and they're tired, and, you know, maybe something's going on at home, and who knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, they always knew that if they were a little bit depleted, that I was going to be emanating extra energy to try to get them to where they needed to get to.
Yeah.
My passion for making sure that the band was always prepared and to make their job as artists as easy as possible was always there. And it wasn't something, yes, it required effort, but it wasn't effort in the sense that I was having to do stuff I didn't want to do. I was always doing stuff that I felt really passionate about doing, because I was like, listen, this is my job and I want to do the best job I can. Because, I mean, in the end, when we're all on stage together, and, you know, and when guys like yourself are off stage, I mean, we're one big team, and I just want us to do as great of a job, because it's our job, as we know now more than ever, is a privilege.
Absolutely.
And just getting to go out there and play for 20,000 people every night is just an amazing privilege. And it was something I had to remind myself of frequently when I would just kind of get in my own world. I go, look up, look at these people, look around, take in what you're doing, because this is amazing.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely no autopilot about your gig, about your position. There's no autopilot about it. I mean, it's just you
autopilot will get you in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just it's unbelievable what it gets handed to you at showtime, basically. Like I said, so many things to talk about. Let's tell me a little bit about the ideas and what you had in mind before, and how you started your drum dojo studio.
Yeah. So, my wife and I built our house. I think it was 2008. And when we did that, we built it with the studio in mind. I wanted to have a space where I could teach. And I mean, really, it kind of just started out as I wanted to have a space to teach. But I had an idea of teaching more than one student at the same time. Yeah. So when we moved into the house, you know, the studio was already built. So I put 6 drum sets in place. I did some local recruiting and started teaching local kids, which I still do. I'll be doing tonight. One of which of those local kids is my daughter, my 12-year-old daughter, who's actually, you know, in the same school that I was first recruiting at, you know, 12 or so years ago, whenever it was we started that. Yeah, about 12 years ago. So it expanded to become a place where I started doing some drum camps. I've done 20 drum camps with mostly adults, but some, you know, younger kids as well, along with, you know, some different, you know, evening seminars. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I made the jump, which was very, talk about, pandemic preparation. This was really more luck than anything else. I started getting into the idea of recording remotely about 3 or 4 years ago. And so the first thing I did was I called up my best friend from high school. I said, hey, send me some songs and I'm just going to do some drum tracks for you. Because I didn't have any clients.
Yeah.
So I said, let me learn how to do this with your stuff. That's recording it, but that's also learning how to deliver it.
Yeah. Sure.
EQ it, and make it ready. And so then I started recording for people remotely, and I've done since that time I've probably done about 350 tracks from home.
That's great.
I did 2 yesterday. I'll probably do at least 1, if not 2, today. Depends. I know I've mentioned a lot of things I'm trying to do today, but I got a busy day of teaching tomorrow. So, the biggest thing for me is always trying to create balance in my life. That's something I'm always constantly working on. So, making sure I'm balancing my professional life with my family life,
sure,
which is super important. But these days, the balance is probably, it's different now because my daughter, and nobody take this the wrong way, but she said, I like the pandemic because you're home. You know what I'm saying? Of course, she doesn't really realize the full significance of it. But, she likes the fact that I've been home every night for her for the last year,
right?
And she loves that.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed that a lot. As much as I love what we do, I can't say that I haven't been refreshed by not being on the road this year. When we do get to go back on the road one day, I'm going to be super excited to do that.
Sure.
And I think all of us are going to look at it like, boy, we thought it was a privilege before, but we're really grateful for this now.
Absolutely. I'm going to really appreciate it. And you've definitely been able to do things that you probably wouldn't have been able to do with a touring schedule.
Yeah. Certainly just being home with my kids and family is something, on a consistent basis has been really great. But it's also allowed me to just jump into some other things. Go, okay, what is my pandemic plan for, I have to think about the pandemic almost like a cocoon. So what am I going to be working on so that when things are better, that I've improved my professional position rather than, just trying to maintain or trying to go back to what I was doing. I mean, like I said, when I get that call from Rascal Flatts one of these days, I'm going to be excited.
Yeah.
But at this point, I have to consider. I mean, I'm not sitting there waiting every day for the phone to ring because it's just not going to ring right now on that stuff. So a couple of the things that I've done this year, I have been working on and finishing my 3rd book. I've been working on and developing and now releasing a new stick and a new bass drum beater with innovative percussion.
Very cool.
That's going to be coming out very soon as we speak here in January of 2020 for those who are watching this.
2021.
2021. It is 2021. Yes. But the next endeavor that I've got is going to be, I am going to be opening up an online academy. So there's going to be a Drum Dojo Academy online.
Cool. Yeah.
And so we're working today. You've got 3 cameras here, and I'm kind of going, yep. I'm kind of jumping into that world myself, and so I'm jumping through some of the hoops of technology right now. And now that I'm almost done with this 3rd book officially, I have been using that book with my students at Belmont, but when that book comes out commercially this year, now that I'm done with the videos, my next thing is starting to work on the educational platform.
Tell me about your time at Belmont, and are you doing any of that right now?
So that was really interesting. Belmont University in Nashville is it's a to me it's a really great university. It's right at the end of Music Row. So if you're thinking about the idea of a student wanting to be close to the music business, you can't get any closer than Belmont University. It's right there.
Yeah.
They've always had a lot of great educators and musicians from like relevancy, people that are gigging and recording in Nashville that teach at Belmont. So they've always had a very real world approach. We want to have people that are really doing it, on Music Row and out in the world, working with our university students. Very forward thinking in that way. So there's been a lot of great drummers that have taught there. Chester Thompson was there for 20 years. Zorro was there a couple of years back. But there's been a long list of really great adjunct professors that they've had there. And so it's always been one of those things like, if I ever did teach at a college in Nashville, that would be the job. That's the perfect job. Well, the pandemic thing started to hit, and one of their professors decided he was going to move away from Nashville, move to another city. And so they opened up a search. I know that they were speaking to probably 10 people about the job, but I, explained to them my passion for teaching. I obviously had, published books. I have, professional accolades. And so I think, I had to get together a resume just like anybody else. I had to do interviews and stuff just like anybody else. But they ended up hiring me as their adjunct professor of drum set studies. So I started there last semester. It was all virtual in the beginning, and then I went to teaching at the university after about a month. It's a great opportunity for me to reach young players that are at a really critical point in their development as musicians. I want to help these young people become much better musicians behind the drum set. That's really my main goal for all of my students. I've spent a lot of time with beginners. I've spent a lot of time with young professionals. I've spent a lot of time with hobbyists. The one group I hadn't been spending a lot of time with is college students, because they spend time with their professors. So now I'm college professor. I've commanded that everybody in my household call me Professor Riley. That has not stuck in any way, shape, or form.
Not happening.
Yeah. So
well, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah. So it's been really great, and I've enjoyed that a lot. And I'm actually starting back this week, teaching even more students than I did last semester.
Very cool. So many other things and credits we could talk about for days, and we have to do a Jim Riley part 2 or something. But you've got movie soundtrack credits, TV music credits, Madden video games you've played
that
on.
was a fun one.
And I want to know, you've got a new book coming out that you're working on, that sort of thing, but what else do you want to do that you haven't done? Have you what have you not covered?
Just in my career in general.
Yeah.
I probably need to put out more of my own music. And I think probably every side man, side woman, all of us that are side people out on the road that support artists, I think that we get in this thing that we're so much about their thing that we never take any time to do our thing.
Right.
And the great thing about music, and I do a lot of producing right now, I'm producing a band, I'm producing an artist, and I do a lot of little one-off songs as well for people. And I love doing that. But I'm rarely working on stuff for myself unless it's the instructional stuff.
Right.
But I want to, I think I need to put out more of my own music. With my first book, Song Charting Made Easy, that was a little bit of a hybrid project because that was on the Nashville number system, which if you're a musician and you're thinking about moving to Nashville, the Nashville number system is definitely something that you need to know because that is the language that we use, both in language and in written. My book is a pretty good resource for that. But in the process of that, I was like, okay, the first chapter, we're doing song with 3 chords, 1, 4, and 5. So if I use a song that's already been written, I have to pay for that. Or I could just write my own songs. So I ended up writing 10 songs for that book, and that ended up being just as much of a solo project as it was an instructional book, which was a lot of fun.
Yep.
And I got to work with my wife singing on 4 of those songs. I sang 6 of them. She sang 4 of them.
Oh, very cool.
So yeah, it was a fun family project. But I want to do more of my own music and produce more music within my family because I got a lot of talented people in this family that I want to do more music with.
Very cool. All right, so one thing I want to do is give a little shout out to Craig. He's like your right arm.
Yeah.
He makes it possible for you to show up and be pretty consistent.
So when we first started with Rascal Flatts, I had a guy named Chad Cates who was our merchandise guy at the time. He was setting up my drums and he would just sort of set them up and that was it.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a tech. 2005 was the Here's to You tour. It was our first big tour. It was the first tour we had Howard Duck playing with us.
Yeah.
And I had a guy named Jimmy Clark as my tech. Jimmy was a set carpenter and a drummer and a drum tech, and he was my tech for a year. And then Jimmy left to go. Actually, he got a job playing drums, so he took that job playing. So the job of drum tech was open. And at the time, our production manager was Ken Thomas. And Ken said, well, Ken was friends with Craig. So Ken called up Craig and said, Craig, would you be interested in coming out? Have you ever thought about, maybe being a drum tech and maybe coming out with us with Rascal Flatts? He says, no, I've literally never thought about being a drum tech ever. But now that you mention it, some of the playing things that he was doing were kind of dried up at the moment, and he was certainly underemployed, and he saw this as maybe a great opportunity to get into something new. So he said, yeah, I'd be interested in that. Well, this is our road manager was Chris Alderman. So Chris calls me and says, hey, so Ken's talking to Craig Krolicki. You know him, right? I'm like, yeah. We go back all the way to 2000. Here's the problem with Craig. The New Year's Eve Craig of 2000, Craig had a gig. And he finds me in the club. He says, hey, you got some microphones, right? I said, yeah. He says, can I borrow some? I said, well, yeah, sure. What do you... He says, I just need some 57s or whatever, Okay. So I lend him some microphones. He plays his New Year's Eve gig. A couple days go by, don't hear from him. Week goes by, don't hear from him. See him in the club. Sort of avoids me. I'm like, what's Craig doing, man? What's he doing, man? So I was kind of like in the back of my mind, I got these microphones. So Chris Alderman calls me, he says, hey, so what do you think about Craig being your drum tech? I says, I'm totally fine with that if he brings me my microphones. He said, what? He says, ask him about the microphones. And so he brings Craig in for a job interview with the road manager now and says, hey, Ken, really likes you. He says, you're really qualified for this. Jim is in principle is really, okay with hiring you on one condition. So what's that? He says, he wants his microphones back. He was like, whoa. So the next morning in a box on Chris's desk were the microphones.
Nice.
I said, well, at least I know he can hold on to stuff.
There you go.
You know, so Craig started working for me, came to my old house. We went to the basement. The basement ceilings were only about 7 feet high. 2006, me and my gang tour. Everything's new. Everything's massive. Double bass kit with a gong. Jay's got his own kit. There, you know, the basement looked like someone had taken brown paper and just exploded in it. You know, it was just everywhere. So I had these 2 drum sets set up, and the first thing he had to do was figure out what everything was, mark it all,
labeling.
You know, label it all so that he would know what it was. We brought it. You know, he ended up packing it up and bringing it to the first rehearsal, and that was the beginning of Craig trial by fire. And so yeah, he's definitely been my right hand man on the shows. It's really easy to say that, you know, the first time I would see the drum set, usually for about the last 10 years of the Rascal Flatts thing, from 2010 to 2020, we never sound checked.
Yeah.
And so it was up to our techs to have everything perfect.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's really easy to say, yeah, just walk in and everything's perfect, but it's not that easy.
Yeah.
You know, we had a world-class group of techs, and Craig was one of those, and I would just be able to walk up and go, yep, this looks great. Hit play. We'd go, and I'd know that everything was going to be fantastic. And if something went wrong, I knew I had someone that had my back. So it was really great. And what's funny is that my first drum tech that I mentioned, Jimmy Clark, is now Metallica with Lars. With Lars. Yeah.
Very cool. And I was going to say, Craig has pretty much analyzed down to the nut and bolt your setup, your tuning.
Yeah.
And you've used them in the studio as well.
Yeah. We worked together on the Back to Us record, and a couple other things before that. We did some stuff for ESPN that ended up being like I think it was a 10th anniversary of My Wish that gets used on the My Wish segment on SportsCenter, ESPN, that kind of thing. But you know, Craig will tell you that I've got a pretty keen ear for how I like the drums tuned, and so what he realized is his preferences and my preferences weren't exactly the same. So what he did was he said, I want you to sit down at the kit. He says, and I want you to tune the whole drum set. And I'm joking. I'm going, I thought that was your job. And he says, well, if you want me to tune like you, I gotta figure out what you're doing. Yeah. So we took the whole drum set apart. I tuned every drum, got it sounding the way that I wanted to. Said, okay. So what he did was he actually isolated each head and harmonically analyzed the pitch of each head that it would sing. Not the pitch that the whole drum would hit, but if you hold the bottom head and you strike the top, it made a particular pitch. And if you tuned it to that pitch every day, and then you tune the bottom one to its pitch every day, all the drums would be tuned the same every time. Yeah. And so that was kind of his method, and worked really, really well for us. And kept our tuning consistent. So if they're consistent, audio guys and girls are consistent placing. If the audio people are consistent placing the microphones, and then there's so many people in the chain that everything has to go right for the show to look and sound great. And I don't think, and I'm sure that that's what this podcast is all about. I mean, yes, I'm one of the people that was on stage, but there's so many people that are behind the scenes that are doing amazing things. I'm sure, if you have not already, you'll be talking to a video director and what they do. Yeah. I mean, they're, bringing in 10 cameras. They have a person that is live color correcting, while another person's dealing with the decks, and they're talking to 10 camera operators and spotlight operators, and it's amazing. Whenever I give a tour of backstage, I always bring them back there because I go, you want to see where the show is really happening. Yeah. This is a really interesting thing to watch and to see, and so when you hear like sports people talk about how important, the people that clean the locker room are and all that stuff, I know they're serious.
Yeah.
Because I know that everybody that's on our tour is equally important, and if we don't get their best effort, we don't get a great show. And so all of the people from the first tech that are marking the floor in the morning to the techs pulling the chains
riggers.
off of the the studio, off of the
venue.
grid at
Yeah.
night. I mean, everybody in between there. I mean, most people see what we do on stage, but as a musician, I've had the opportunity to see what happens from 8 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock at night, and it's really amazing. And that's why I think what you're doing with this podcast is so cool.
Oh, thanks. Well, we will have to figure out another time because you've got so much, and we talked about some of the things in your studio, and there's stories for everything. But so tell us, how do people follow you? Where do you want to be followed? How do you want people to find you? I know you have a YouTube channel.
I do. Yeah, probably the best place. I used to think it was Facebook. It's probably Instagram. Is really good. You can find me in most places at Jim Riley Music.
Jim Riley Music.
Yeah,
Do you have a website of your own?
I do. It's JimRileyMusic.
Okay.
.com. But yeah, I mean, Instagram's good. Facebook, Messenger, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I guess I'm always surprising people because I'm so accessible in those ways. But the truth is, I just love talking music and talking drums. And I think people are sort of like, man, you're Jim Riley. What are you doing here talking? I'm like, I still love drums just like you guys do.
Yeah.
I want to talk about drums, and
Yeah.
I'm on vintage forums, and
Yeah.
we're talking about vintage Ludwig drums, and the Nashville drummers page, or some different drum pages that are just dedicated to really more amateur players. And there's definitely some professionals like myself that get on there, and I think that they love the interaction, and I do too, because it just shows that I don't think of myself as someone that's up on some sort of pedestal. I'm just a fortunate working musician, and if I have some knowledge that I can impart on someone else that wants to hear it, I'm happy to share it.
Well, it's an incredible story because you've had all the highs and lows. It wasn't an easy route by any means. Even in the successful groups, Rascal Flatts included, there's still a lot of highs and lows and challenges that you've definitely overcome.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what I wanted to sign up for. I wanted to get the full experience, and I hope it's not. I hope this is just a pause. I know for some artists, they're just kind of looking to say they can't wait to get on tour. With Rascal Flatts, there's a moment of suspended animation in the history of Rascal Flatts right now. Jay's concentrating on his label. Jay has Red Street Records. He's got a really great side project that he's doing called The Rise Above,
right,
with drummer Dean Castronovo and a really great group of musicians. Gary has a lot of solo endeavors that he's into, both in Christian music and in secular music as a country artist. Joe Don is, he's continuing to write songs, and really the most important thing for Joe Don is he's just been super happy to be home with his family, which is so important to him. So we're in this moment of suspended animation, and I think a lot of things have to play out, and I hope that the demand for Rascal Flatts continues to be out there, and I know we've got some amazing fans, and I hope that you guys get in their ear and tell these guys, we want to hear you, come back. Rascal Flatts Hell Freezes Over tour. We're ready.
Absolutely.
And I'll be ready if the call comes in.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's going to happen one way or another. All right. Well, listen, I hope we get to do this again because I know you got a lot more stories.
This is great.
Everybody, when Rascal Flatts is back out, Mr. Jim Riley is running the show. He's the band leader and drummer and music entrepreneur. Jim Riley. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. Let us know what you thought by leaving us a comment. You can also follow us on these social networks. And if you want to see more, please like, share, and subscribe.